Ooh, I'm gonna make some people mad. So I had originally started reading The Shadow Rising around the time that the show was premiering, having just come off the highs of The Dragon Reborn and really excited to read the next book in the series. Then I saw the show, and to be perfectly honest, the whole thing really kind of soured me towards the books for a while. I just kind of wanted to get away from the whole story and community for a bit to kind of reset. The show was completely ruining the series that I had just started falling in love with, and the community seemed to kind of be making a lot of excuses for the show, which I still don't really understand, because it seems like most people agree now that it was not a good adaptation. Not only that, but I had gotten about 30 or 40% into this book, and it was so confusing, and it was quite a slog at the time, and I decided to just go on to something else and come back to it later when I'm a little refreshed. And that was more than a year ago now. And I kept saying that I'd get back to it someday, but I never really did. But then, kind of funny story, about 2 weeks ago, there was a day where for some reason my cell service just was not working. It went out completely, and I had no other books downloaded besides the one that I had just read for the podcast. I think it was a Dresden Files book, and The Shadow Rising. So I figured, let's do it. Why not? I gotta listen to something, and that is how we find ourselves here today. So I'm going to talk about my general thoughts on this entry in the Wheel of Time. This isn't exactly a review, but it's also not my typical deep dive that I would usually do. There will be spoilers for this book though, so if you haven't read this far in the series, you may want to turn back now. Although nothing really happens in this book, so you're probably fine either way.
Oh, here we go.
So let's rip the band-aid off right away, right? This book was fine. I just don't understand the overwhelming hype for it. People were making it seem like it was like changes from the Dresden Files or the later Battleground from the same series, and I just don't really get that. I don't understand why this is such a huge fan favorite. Like, it was fine, it wasn't bad, but I just don't understand the overflowing amount of hype for this book. It definitely wasn't the be-all end-all, and I feel like not much really happened in this entry. There was no major plot points that were resolved. Everyone is more or less in the same spot that they were at the beginning of the book, except for Rand, who's got some new groupies. You know, some people ended up in different parts of the world and did different things, but I feel like nobody besides maybe Rand has really accelerated their character plot. Some of them have a bit of an arc, like we see some changes with Perrin, but overall for the plot, for the story, I feel like we're kind of in the same boat that we were at the beginning of the book. And this has kind of been my problem with hype in general lately. I love to hype things up, and I love to be hyped, but I feel like for something like this, it really can't possibly live up to your expectations, especially when you have so many Wheel of Time fans saying, just wait until you get to the Shadow Rising. Like, oh, your whole opinion on the series will change when you get to Shadow Rising. It's amazing. It's like everything starts at Shadow Rising. And I, like, literally do not understand that thinking. Like, I do not understand. Like, Dragon Reborn, the third book in the series, was way better than this book. Way better than the Shadow Rising. Even the first and second books were so much better than this book, and I don't understand why there is so much love for this book specifically, and I'll talk about more about that in a minute. There were some interesting moments, but the other thing was, besides it being overhyped, it was such a slog to get through. I literally had to force myself to keep reading it. I had that 1 or 2 days where my cell service was really weird, and I had to read whatever was downloaded on my phone. But after that, when I had the choice of downloading other books and stuff, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna force myself to get through this. But it was a slog. There was so many, and it wasn't a slog in the way that the first book was, where there's a lot of travel scenes and a lot of kind of downtime. It was more just characters talking about what they were going to do, and that same scene happening over and over and over again, and just kind of other scenes that probably could have been cut out. There was so much with the Aiel that I just did not care about, and I think we could have accelerated that whole thing. Like, I think this was a 40 plus hour audiobook, and it just did not need to be that long for what ended up happening in this book plot wise. There was character development, like I said, but man, this book could have been cut in half, honestly. And let me just say, so I know that I'm ranting a little bit, but there is not one single series that I want to absolutely love more than The Wheel of Time. I want to be a part of the discussion on this series so bad. This series has got to be hailed as one of the best for a reason, and I recognize that, and I want to love it so much, and I want to be a part of this community. But so far, this series has been fine. And like I said, everyone told me that this is where the series would really hit its stride, and it doesn't, at least not for me and what I expected. But I do want to love it, and I did love the first 3 books, but I don't really think that those compare to a lot of the other stuff that I've read either. But I still loved them, I still enjoyed them, but so far I'm not understanding the absolute devotion that people have to the series, but especially this book. But I really want to get there, and I really want to finish the series because I'm really interested in how it ends, and I know that people love it for a reason, right? So I just got to get there and find out for myself. Like I said, the first 3 books were awesome, even if some parts were kind of slow, and I really hope we get back to that in the next book or 2. I'm really worried that this will turn into a bit of a slog if this was supposed to be the high point. But I also really want to know how it all ends, because the overall premise of the series, the overall, like, what this world is, like, once you kind of know that it's in a sort of like future post-apocalyptic thing kind of going on, and you know, there's different turns of the wheel and all that stuff. Once you understand all of that, the premise for this world, the premise for this story is so cool. And I want to see how Brandon Sanderson wraps that all up in the final 2 books. Oh, this one's really gonna hurt. Okay, so honestly, I enjoyed Daniel Green's summary of this book way more than I enjoyed reading the actual book. He actually laid it out in ways that I could understand and wasn't as bloated. And let's be honest, you guys are gonna hate me. His prose, in just the way he talks about this book, is better than the way Robert Jordan wrote it. Also, side note, I wish I had time to read this series physically. I read the first book physically, I think almost all the way through, and I really enjoyed my time with that. But then when I switched over to the audiobooks, I do not like Michael Kramer. I think that some of his newer books, like Tress of the Emerald Sea and the Frugal Wizard's Guide, are pretty good. I feel like he did a pretty good job narrating those. But in these Wheel of Time books, he just sounds so tired, and it makes everything kind of blend together into this soupy haze of obscurity. And I just don't like it. I wish that someone else would go back and re-narrate this series for like a modern audiobook audience. So this was my biggest problem both this time and the first time I tried reading this book, Rand's whole vision thing in the desert was super annoying. I know it's foreshadowing for future books, and there's all this stuff there that directly connects to events in the future, but it went on way too long, and it doesn't do anything for me now. And I'm usually the guy. I'm the guy that's like, oh, it'll pay off later, just keep reading, and like, it'll be awesome. But I've never seen anything as confusing and egregious as this, where I'm just completely confused for like several chapters from what I can remember. It went on for so long. It felt like it was at least 2 chapters of Rand being there and seeing all these visions. And my second time through, I kind of understood more of what he was seeing. I understood more about the Aiel and how they came from this past of being connected to the Way of the Leaf. And that's awesome, but so much of it was so confusing, and I just had no idea what was going on. And I was kind of like, I shouldn't have to be just slogging through a couple chapters of not understanding anything. And this is also kind of why I don't read Malazan, because it seems like it's just a whole series of this where you just don't know what's going on at all until you're several books in and things start connecting a little bit more. But yeah, this whole thing was just ridiculous. It doesn't do any, like I said, it doesn't do anything for me as the reader in the moment. At least with other books, like with Dresden Files, there is so much foreshadowing in those early books. You could go back, and after reading through the series, you could go back and see things like, oh wow, that was foreshadowed all the way back here, and that's awesome. I love that stuff. But in something like a Dresden Files book, you're not enjoying the moment that you're in while that's happening. It's not taking you out of the story just to pay off later. And that was the biggest issue I had with this book, I think. And here's the thing too. You shouldn't have to reread a whole 14-book series just to enjoy it finally on the second read-through. Like, I'll be honest, I'm more than likely not going to reread this whole series. It's just too big of a commitment, and maybe if I live to be ancient like Jim from Fantasy for the Ages, I'll run out of things to read, and I'll be like, oh, I should reread that Wheel series. But I would not hold your breath. I don't know, it's such a massive commitment. Even now, going through for the first time, it's like, I still have like another 10 books in front of me, and they're all super long. And by the way, relax everybody, Jim is a good friend of mine, and it was most definitely a joke. So let's mix some good into this, because I don't want to just, I do want to rant about this book, but it wasn't all bad. Like, there were parts of this story that I very much enjoyed. I very much enjoyed Perrin's chapters, and really throughout this whole series, his chapters have been the most fast-paced and have the most action and adventure than anyone else's. And that's not to say that everything needs to be like boom, explosion, and fighting and all this stuff. It doesn't need to be like that. His chapters are just the most interesting. There is the most happening in them. And in this book, I really enjoyed seeing the two rivers again, and Perrin kind of returning as this older, more mature version of himself that's also mysterious to the people of the town of Two Rivers, and people are kind of looking up to him and respecting him a lot more. And I really love the whole storyline with him and Fail. I think that is probably the only romance in the book that is fairly well written and actually has a little bit more depth to it. I think that the romance between Nynaeve and Lan is absolutely ridiculous. It's so absurd. Even everything that happened in this book with like Egwene and Elaine and Rand, that was so weird. Like, she I don't know, she just basically like passed Elaine off to Rand, like, oh, I'm done with him, you can have him. It was just this really weird moment that I didn't enjoy at all. And speaking of Rand, I am not enjoying him as a character. I really liked him in the first 2 books, and then he took this weird turn in book 3, The Dragon Reborn, and now I feel like he's not acting like himself from the first book, and it doesn't feel like character growth. It doesn't feel like he's acting differently from the first book because he's grown as a person or whatever. It just happened really sporadically and randomly, and it's just super odd. He's just got this super stale personality that I am not vibing with at all. And I wish that there had been I wish he hadn't been gone for all of book 3, because I feel like we would have seen a more gradual arc into what he is now. Maybe that'll get revealed at some point, what all was going on with him in book 3. But I just think it's so weird to take your main character out of a book, out of an entire book almost, and then just have him return a completely different person. I feel like that's really lazy, and just like, oh, he went away for a while and experienced some things, but now he's back and he's kind of this weird and stoic guy that's really stale and just doesn't have much of a personality. But I did really like him as a character before, and so I hope that I will come to like the new Rand over the next couple books. I'm also really confused as to if he's supposed to be going crazy little by little, because we've seen him acting really weird, so it seems like he is, but if he is, then there has to be a point where that gets fixed because he's the main character. And I really thought that that would be addressed in this book. I thought there would be a point where it's like, okay, this is what is going on with him and this is what the plan is. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that I was hoping would be addressed in this book, like the whole plot line with the Black Aja or the Dark Aja. I cannot tell you how tired I am about hearing about the Black Aja. I thought they were going to be one of the kind of like early bad guys that get taken off the board near the beginning of the series, because they just don't seem like as big of a threat compared to the Forsaken. And I'm really ready for them to go and for the girls to move on to something else, literally anything else. I just don't want to hear about the Black Aja anymore. Oh my god. Cold Gatorade is literally God's gift to mankind. There is no better drink in the summer than cold Gatorade. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just love it. When you do this much ranting, you need a cold drink. Let's get back to it. The last thing that I will say about this story, I'll leave us on a fairly good note. The last thing I'll say about the story was that the ending was really, really cool. I love the idea that Rand has finally found someone who can teach him how to channel, because this whole time I've been really curious how Robert Jordan was going to do that with all of the other male mages being either stilled or killed. And I'm really interested to see what Rand will be able to do in the next couple books with this mentorship and with his powers. I think that he can get a huge upgrade. I mean, like, he's got the power, like the power scale, but he needs refinement. He needs to figure out how to use it better. And the whole thing with the Forsaken was such a smart way to do that, where he's essentially captured a Forsaken into being kind of like a minion for him, and he's given the Forsaken no way out. Like, there is no, like, he can't just go back to the dark side or whatever, because they will take advantage of him, and he has to then help Rand, because that's really his only option. I think that was well done, and like I said, I'm really excited to see where that goes. And also, Rand riding off into the sunset with all his followers was kind of hype. I'll admit that was pretty dope. And in the audiobook, they have this music that accompanies it, And if you guys have seen any of our Dresden Files content, you know I love some good music at the beginning and the ending of an audiobook, and this did not disappoint. I really liked the music that kind of accompanied Rand and his whole crew kind of riding out with all his Aiel that are kind of discombobulated, but the ones that are with him are his true followers, the people that really believe in him. And so it kind of feels like this is the start of the story in a large way. And in that sense, I understand what people were saying, where it's like, oh, the story kind of starts with Shadow Rising. From the ending, I understand that. And I get how everything could kind of flow from this. And I just really hope that is the case, because like I said, I really want to enjoy this series. I really want to have a good time with the next couple books. I hope you guys will let me know in the comments if the next book or two kind of is that ramping up feeling where this is the beginning of the story and then it just kind of goes up from there. I would like to see not only more action, but just more of a fast pace. Just more of things happening, like Perrin's chapters. Perrin's chapters are pretty much perfect. I never feel like it's super slow. I never feel like it's a slog in his chapters. And I hope that now that we've gotten all this kind of preliminary stuff out of the way, then it can go on to be more like that. But yeah, I'm super excited about this. Again, I hope I didn't make anybody too mad. I really want to enjoy the series, but I just did not like this book. But I'm excited for the future. All right, so those are my thoughts. I know I probably made a lot of people pretty angry, and I want to be super clear. I still love the series for what it is. And I do have really fond memories of the first 3 books, especially. It's just that this one was way overhyped, and I will never understand why people go on and on about it. But I am glad that I finished it. I had that hanging over my head for a long time, and I've learned my lesson. I most likely will not tell people when I start the next one, because people have been bugging me about finishing this book for a long time now. So that's it. If I didn't make you too mad and you'd like to see the rest of my journey through Wheel of Time, then hitting those like and subscribe buttons down below is all you have to do. Like I said, I can't promise when my next Wheel of Time video will be out, but it will happen at some point, and I do want to keep reading the series. Down in the description, you'll find links to our Twitter and Discord where you can reach out to me and yell at me if you'd like to. And if you want to support us in a big way, you can help fund us on our Patreon, which is also linked down in the description. I will see you on Tuesday with another podcast episode, and then next Saturday with another video kind of like this one. It'll be something. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, may you always find water and shade. That's something that the Aiel say that I learned. And a big shout out to our first Night Angel tier patron, Shad Zaman. Thank you so much, man.